LaGrange, North Carolina, 1946. Frank Lucas was 15 years old when he watched his cousin get murdered. Not just killed, murdered, in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, in front of Frank. And the men who did it walked away laughing because they knew nobody would do anything about it. His cousin's name was Obadiah. Everybody called him Obi. He was 22 years old, worked at the furniture factory, had a wife and a baby on the way. He was quiet, respectful, stayed out of trouble. But he made one mistake that cost him his life in Jim Crow, North Carolina. He looked at a white woman. Didn't touch her, didn't speak to her, just looked, and that was enough. 3 Ku Klux Klan members came to the factory that afternoon, dragged Obi out into the dirt parking lot, beat him with tire irons while 50 people watched. Nobody intervened. Nobody called the police. Because in 1946 LaGrange, the police were probably under those hoods. Frank was across the street, sweeping the front steps of the general store where he worked after school. He saw everything, heard Obi screaming, begging, crying for them to stop. They didn't stop until he stopped moving. Then they got in their truck and drove away, left Obi bleeding in the dirt like he was nothing, like his life meant nothing. Frank ran to him, held his cousin's head in his lap. Obi's eyes were open but unfocused, blood everywhere. His last words were barely a whisper. "Don't let them forget me, Frank. Don't let them win." Then he was gone. The sheriff came 2 hours later, looked at the body, looked at the witnesses, asked a few questions. Nobody saw anything. Nobody knew anything. Case closed. No arrests, no investigation, no justice. They buried Obi 3 days later. Small funeral, family and close friends. The preacher said God works in mysterious ways. Frank's mother cried. His father stood stone-faced, silent. At the cemetery, after everyone left, Frank stayed at the grave, stood there for 2 hours in the rain, made a promise to his cousin, made a promise to himself. This would never happen again, not to him, not to anyone he loved, and the men who did this would pay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. That night, Frank packed a bag, took the money he'd saved from his job, $63, everything he had. He wrote his mother a note. "Gone to Harlem. Don't worry, I'll send money. I love you." He walked to the train station before sunrise, bought a one-way ticket, never looked back. Harlem, 1946. Frank arrived with nothing, no connections, no place to stay, just rage and a promise. He found work doing whatever he could, washing dishes, running errands, cleaning buildings, saved every penny, watched, learned. The streets of Harlem were different from LaGrange. Here, black men could fight back, could build something, could have power. He met Bumpy Johnson in 1947. Bumpy was already a legend, the man who made the Italian mafia respect Harlem, the enforcer from Madame Stephanie St. Clair, smart, strategic, feared. Frank started as a driver. Bumpy saw something in him, that quiet intensity, that calculation behind his eyes. Bumpy asked him once where he came from. "North Carolina." "Why'd you leave?" Frank's jaw tightened. "They killed my cousin, the Klan. Nobody did anything about it." Bumpy nodded slowly. "So you came here to forget?" "No, I came here to remember and to make sure I'm never that powerless again." Bumpy smiled. "Good. Powerless men die powerless. Strong men make their own justice." For the next 20 years, Frank worked for Bumpy, learned the game, built connections, watched how power really worked, not with reckless violence, but with strategy, with intelligence, with patience. When Bumpy died in 1968, Frank took over, built the Blue Magic Empire, made millions, became one of the most powerful drug dealers in American history. But he never forgot Obi, never forgot that promise. And in 1971, 25 years after his cousin's murder, Frank Lucas went back to North Carolina, not to visit, not to reminisce, to settle the debt. September 1971. Frank drove into LaGrange in a black Cadillac, alone. No entourage, no flash, just business. The town hadn't changed much. Same streets, same buildings, same people. Older now, but the same attitudes. The same racism simmering just below the surface. He parked outside the old general store where he'd worked as a kid. It was closed now, boarded up, but the furniture factory across the street was still operating. Same parking lot where Obi died. Frank sat in the car for a long time, remembering, planning. He'd done his research, knew exactly who'd killed his cousin. 3 men. 2 were dead now, natural causes, heart attack and cancer. The universe had handled them. But the 3rd man was still alive. Harold Gentry, 68 years old, retired, living on a small farm outside town with his wife. Gentry had lived a full life, had children, grandchildren, got to grow old, got everything Obi never had. Frank drove to the farm just after sunset. The house was small, weathered, a porch with a rocking chair, a dog barking in the yard. He knocked on the door. Harold Gentry answered, old now, gray hair, wrinkled face, glasses. He looked at Frank with confusion. "Can I help you?" "You don't remember me, do you?" Gentry squinted. "Should I?" 1946, the furniture factory. You and 2 other men beat a young black man to death in the parking lot. His name was Obadiah Lucas. He was my cousin. The color drained from Gentry's face. He tried to close the door. Frank's hand stopped it. "I'm not here to hurt you," Frank said quietly. "I just want you to understand something." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You remember. I can see it in your eyes." Gentry's wife called from inside. "Harold? Who is it?" "Tell her it's nobody. Tell her you'll be right back." Gentry hesitated, then called back. "Just a salesman, honey. I'll handle it." Frank stepped onto the porch, closed the door behind him. They stood there in the fading light, 2 men connected by violence from a quarter-century ago. "You killed my cousin because he looked at a white woman. You beat him to death with a tire iron while 50 people watched. Then you went home to dinner like nothing happened." Gentry's hands shook. "That was a long time ago. I was different then. The times were different. Obi had a wife, a baby on the way. He never got to meet his son. His son grew up without a father because of you. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I can't change the past." Frank stared at him. "No, you can't. But I can change your future." Gentry went pale. "Please, I have grandchildren." "So does Obi's son. 3 of them. They'll never know their great-grandfather because of what you did." "What do you want? Money? I don't have much, but—" "I don't want your money." Frank reached into his jacket. Gentry flinched, probably expecting a gun. Frank pulled out an envelope, handed it to him. "What is this?" "Open it." With trembling hands, Gentry opened the envelope. Inside were photographs. His house, his children's houses, his grandchildren at school. Detailed information, addresses, schedules, everything. "I've been watching you for 6 months. I know everything about you, where you go, who you see, when you're alone." Gentry's breathing became rapid, panicked. "I could end you right now, could make it look like an accident, could make your whole family disappear and nobody would ever know it was me. That's the power I have. Power you took from my cousin when you murdered him. Please. But I'm not going to do that. You know why? Because Obi was a good man, a peaceful man, and killing you won't bring him back, won't make his son's childhood any better, won't change anything except making me into you." Frank stepped closer. Gentry backed against the door. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to live with this every single day. You're going to wake up knowing that I could have killed you, but chose not to. You're going to look at your grandchildren and remember that Obi never got that chance. And you're going to carry that weight until the day you die naturally, in your sleep, surrounded by the family he never had. Tears ran down Gentry's face. And if I ever hear that you've hurt another black person, if I ever hear your name associated with any violence, any racism, anything, those photographs show you how easy it is for me to find you. Next time, I won't be so merciful."
Frank turned to leave. "Why?" Gentry whispered. "Why not just kill me? Why show me mercy?" Frank stopped, looked back. "Because my cousin's last words were, 'Don't let them win.' If I kill you, they win. Violence becomes the answer. The cycle continues. But if I show you that I have the power to end you and choose not to, if I make you live with what you did, if I prove that we're better than you ever were, then Obi wins. Then everything he stood for means something." Frank walked to his car, got in, started the engine. Gentry stood on the porch, holding those photographs, shaking. Frank drove away, back to New York, back to his empire. But something had changed. A weight had lifted. Not completely. The grief would never fully go away. But the rage, that burning need for revenge that had driven him for 25 years, had transformed into something else. Purpose, understanding, power used with restraint. When Frank got back to Harlem, he went to visit Obi's son. His name was Marcus. He was 26 now, had a good job, a family. Frank had been sending money anonymously for years, paying for education, opportunities. They met at a diner. Frank told him everything, about LaGrange, about what happened to his father, about the promise he'd made. Marcus listened quietly. When Frank finished, Marcus asked, "Did you kill him, the man who murdered my father?" "No." "Why not?" Frank repeated what he'd told Gentry, about breaking the cycle, about being better, about winning by being stronger than the hate. Marcus nodded slowly. "My father would have liked that. From what my mother told me, he wasn't a violent man. He believed in dignity, in rising above. He did. That's why I made the choice I made." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus reached across the table, shook Frank's hand. "Thank you for remembering him, for honoring him, for showing me that strength isn't always about revenge." That conversation changed Frank, made him think about legacy differently, about what he was building and why. He continued running his empire. Blue magic dominated the streets, money poured in, but he started using some of that money differently. Anonymous donations to schools in Harlem, scholarships for kids who couldn't afford college, help for families who'd lost fathers to violence or prison. Not enough to make up for the damage his drugs caused, he knew that. Wasn't trying to be a hero or wash away his sins, but maybe, in some small way, he could break cycles, could give kids options he never had, could honor Obi's memory by helping people the way nobody helped them. The streets never knew about Frank's trip to North Carolina. He never told anyone except Marcus. It wasn't about reputation or respect. It was personal. A promise kept, a debt settled not with violence, but with something harder, restraint, mercy, the kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. Years later, after Frank's arrest and cooperation with the feds, after everything fell apart, a reporter asked him about his biggest regret. "The drugs," Frank said, "the lives destroyed, the families broken, that's something I'll carry forever." "And your proudest moment?" Frank thought for a long time and finally said, "The moment I chose to be better than the people who hurt me. The moment I realized that real power isn't taking lives, it's choosing not to when you could." The reporter didn't understand, didn't press for details, but Frank knew.
knew that in September 1971, standing on Harold Gentry's porch with every reason and every means to take revenge, he'd honored his cousin more than violence ever could. "Don't let them win," Obie had said. And Frank didn't. He won. Not with bullets or bodies, with restraint, with mercy, with the understanding that breaking cycles of violence is harder and braver than continuing them. That's the story they don't tell about Frank Lucas. Not the drug empire, not the blue magic, not the money, but the moment a kingpin chose humanity over revenge. The moment he proved that the strongest power is the power to choose differently. If this story hit you, smash that subscribe button. We're telling the Frank Lucas stories history forgot, the moments that defined him, the choices that made him more than just a criminal. Drop a like if you think Frank made the right choice, and in the comments, tell me, what would you have done? Revenge or mercy? More untold stories coming next. Don't miss it.